Okay. What my intention is with the live discussions is to cover one of the topics of the discussion questions, and I wanted to see if that would promote a more in-depth and engaging conversation through the posts. From what I've seen over the years, it's the discussion posts are kind of just barely let me, I have to do this, I'll get it answered as quick as I can and move on. And I understand that's the way it is with a lot of our assignments, because you got a lot of work to do, 6 weeks. Most of you, are working full time, have families and life. But, part of the discussion questions purpose is to mimic some of the discussion we would have if you did attend on ground or in classroom courses, and you went to a class for like 3 hours at a time, and we started discussing a topic. And in that case, you wouldn't just say 1 or 2 sentences and stop. Hopefully there would be more engaging, and you would challenge each other and question each other with your thoughts on the subject. So last year I've been trying this method of my live conversation to be bringing up a topic of one of the discussion questions, and so far it's still a test model because a lot of the live sessions aren't highly attended, so I don't know how it's working or not. You also have the opportunity with the live session to ask questions about any of the material. A lot of times, if you have a real specific question about the material or the homework or something I asked, let me know ahead of time if you can. A lot of this material I know, but I'm not doing it day to day, so I might not be able to give you a real good answer off the top of my head. I can help you figure it out, but especially if it's a homework assignment, sometimes right then I can't give you the answer, if that makes sense. And I can always, we can always set up a time later too. And this isn't your only opportunity to ask me questions. So that's kind of the purpose of this. Does that sound good?
Yes, that's great.
Okay. And it's not going to last hours or anything, just hopefully 15-20 minutes, depending on how we can get through the I'll go through the material, and then if you want me to go through an exercise, I can. So it just depends on where we're at and then how long to go through an exercise or so. And you can, if you want, leave your mic off or on, depending on the background noise and how much you want to engage in the conversation or such. So, and so the topic I was going to discuss is activity-based costing, and the purpose, I actually did not write down what the specific discussion question was. So, whoops. I thought I had it down and then I lost that somewhere. But the intent was, how do we use activity-based costing, and how is it different from just, adding up the cost of what a product is, basically. So that I'll bring it up. Okay. Okay, yeah. Basically, what are the advantages and disadvantages of activity-based costing? And do you believe it's appropriate for a company to use it? And what type of analysis would be completed before applying the cost method? So I guess first we have to define what activity-based costing is and how it's different from any other type of costing method. Typically, a traditional costing method is you would just gather all the costs to produce your materials or produce your goods and divide by how many you made. So if you made a red widget, a blue widget, and a blue widget with a tail, you would just add up what it costs to make the red widget and divide that by how many widgets you made that month, and you would add up the cost of what it took to make the blue widgets, and then how much it costs to make the blue widgets with the tail, and divide up how many you made by each one, and that's what it cost. Versus activity-based costing. Activity-based costing is you identify the activities involved by making the product, and when you say activity, or when I'm saying activity involved, what do I mean, Kelsey? What do I mean by, or what do you think I mean by saying the activity?
Is it like, I don't know, like the labor or like the people that go into and moving and stuff of what you're making?
Right. And I put you on the spot. I'm trying to make it a little bit more activity or interactive instead of me just talking to you, lecturing. It's like the labor, but it's defining what that labor is, such as if John is in packaging or shipping, and then if so-and-so is assembly work, or if there's actually an automated assembly process that doesn't involve labor, but if it's going down the line and there's those machines that are doing the things that replaced people. So there's the machine hours, or if there's painting, that's a activity. Where I used to work, they didn't do manufacturing, they rebuilt aircraft parts. Imagine that in Wichita, aircraft parts.
Yeah.
But instead, they had two areas, I guess. They had manufacturing, but they also had rebuild or manufacture. So they had an area where they had to use chemical stripper on the parts that came in, and they put them in a big bucket with this chemical. And so that would be a process. Everybody loved to talk about the process because this guy did stripping. So each one of those, is a process, or sandblasting or those various things. So it's not just saying labor, it would be the very distinct process, because like I said, at the company I worked with, they did have manufacturing. They did build brand new starters, but they also rebuilt or repaired starters. So that would be an important difference when you're doing your cost of a starter, because when you're looking at the activities involved, manufacturing a starter, a new one, doesn't need that stripping process. It doesn't need sandblasting. But if you're rebuilding one, all of them need the stripping. All of them the parts have to be put in that chemical stripper, because it cleans off anything, all the oils and gas and anything that's on it. And then again, why activity costs would be costing is a good process for some businesses to use, because only some of those rebuilt starters have to go through the sandblasting. Or it's not actually, they don't use sand, but it's called blasting process, depending on the condition of that unit. So you wouldn't want to take the cost to rebuild every starter that comes to the building and just divide by, let's say they rebuilt 152 starters that month. They wouldn't want to take the cost across the board and just divide by 152, because not every one of them used that blasting process. That was only used on ones that had material on them that the chemical stripping didn't take off. So that's an example where a company, if they have that different type of process or products that use different processes, they would want to look at using activity-based costing than just straight product cost in manufacturing and divide by the number of units. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's more of the other form of costing is more general, and this is more specific to
Right.
what the product it needs, I guess.
As I say, now to throw a wrench in the discussion, that place used what's called job cost, because every part that went through was so different on the rebuilds and repair side, because this one may use 4 screws, 2 bolts, and blah, 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 blah. And that one might use an armature and 3 bolts. And so they were actually did costing, true costing on what every part costs to repair. But the example using just, if a product line, if this product line, every one of them went through the stripping process, because let's say the raw material came in and it had, I know there's some kind of metals that come in and they have like grease or residue or something on them. And that has to be cleaned off before it can finish, it can go through the manufacturing process. But then we get this aluminum in to produce, to go through the manufacturing process, and it comes in clean. So this product goes through a process. It goes through the chemical stripping process. Then it can go through the manufacturing, and then it can be painted and then packaged and shipped. Whereas this one that used aluminum, it didn't have to be chemically stripped. So it just comes in, goes through manufacturing, then painted, then shipped, or packaged and shipped. So while you're just at first you think, well, the only difference is it uses different material. So that would be the only cost difference. Well, no, there's a difference in the activity because the one product used an additional activity. So you would want to make sure you use activity-based costing because one is requiring a different activity.
So does activity-based is activity-based costing any more accurate than the job costing? Like, does one break it down more than the other?
No, job costing would be more accurate because with job costing at this, like the aircraft repair station, they kept a work order and they would take it to, like, the person would like break down the unit, realize, find out what parts had to be replaced, write it down, take it to parts department. And so then parts were issued to that job. And so they know exactly what parts were issued to the job. Whether it was a 2-cent screw, a $150 armature, $3 spring, whatever. And the different repairmen tracked their hours, because most of the time it was just one repairman, but if it had to be if it had to be blasted, there were only 2 or 3 people who could do that. So their time had to go down, and they said what function they did. And then once it was completed, then it went to inspection, and the inspector would put down their time, and then it went to shipping. Now, shipping kind of went into overhead, so the shipping cost, that didn't get added to the individual jobs, because that was a negligible amount of time. Some products might take a lot of time to package and get ready for shipping, so some companies might assign that to the cost of the part. These parts, we had our boxes and packaging ready, and so they were pretty much, a minute or so. So that piece wasn't allocated to the job. But so we had the exact cost of the parts, and then we had calculated what we were charging, what rate we charged for our repairman's time. We had calculated, so we didn't have per se accurate or an exact cost of like what it cost us for a guy working on it, but we knew what we charged for that by the hour. And so yes, the job cost is more accurate, but if we had 152 units that we're repairing, even if we're using a computer, that's feasible to do the job cost for, because when parts department, they still have to take the time to issue those parts out by the job. But if you're producing a product on a manufacturing line, like I said, say we were making keychains, and this keychain used steel, and this keychain was using the aluminum, and well, keychain's probably not, we'll go with keychain. And so they were going through, and like I said, the steel had to have that extra process to go through the chemical to be cleaned. Well, keychains, you're going to make, let's say, thousands. And the keychain, you're going to have that ring. Then you're going to have all the links to get to, and say it's a little flashlight keychain. And then you're going to have the flashlight with the bulb, and then a battery, and an end cap. So you're going to have several parts. So if you processed and you produced 1,000 of this kind of keychain and 1,000 of the other kind of keychain each month, your parts department person isn't going to want to issue a total of 2,000 of the rings, 2,000 sets of the links, connecting the ring to the flashlight, and issue 2,000 light bulbs individually to each work order. And so do you get what I'm saying? While the job cost is definitely more accurate, when you have a production line where everything going through the assembly line is basically the same, it's almost as accurate to do it by activity cost, where you're going to issue the parts in the batch and just do it in total by activity. Yes, you might drop a light bulb somewhere, and so you used 1,000 one light bulb. And somewhere along the lines, 2 of those lenses on the flashlight got cracked, 2 or 3. So you had 1,003 lenses. So it's not quite as accurate because you don't know where those 3 went, but is it worth spending that much time having the people check, issue those parts per job when you have 2,000 flashlight keychains go through, or just issue them by batch and be off by 3 pieces?
Okay, I think that helps clarify a little bit.
Okay. So that's why you do make some decisions of the cost of what you put in place, and that's also, companies have to make that decision of when they're going to use activity-based costing, because to put activity-based costing into place, they do have to identify the activities that the product line goes through. So they'd have to sit down and go through each activity. And while that sounds simple, sometimes, it's a good activity, I think, for a company to do, but it does take some time, which nobody has anymore. But, everybody would have to sit down and say it goes to this step, this step, this step, and this step, and they'd have to do it for every product. And then a couple of the key things are, then they have to define what you want to say is, what is the cost hierarchy? Are you going to cost things out by unit? Does it make more sense for each activity by batch? Is it just by product, or is it even just by facility, by day? Like I said, with that chemical stripper process, it isn't by unit. It's however many pieces are ready to go and could fit in the bucket at that time. If nobody else had any starters torn down, ready to go, when that guy had his ready to go, then he had his 3 or 4 pieces and did it right then. If 3 or 4 other guys had theirs torn down, ready to go, then he put whatever fit in. And so he might have the parts for three starters that went in there. So in that case, it's per batch, but so not by unit. So you have to identify the cost of this activity is going to be by unit. But this activity is this one's labor hours, or this one's day. How are we going to break this cost down? Machine hours versus man hours. Then how am I going to accumulate the cost for each of these drivers? What is the driver for each activity? Packaging is going to be each unit. Again, the assembly machine hours, that's the units going through the machinery assembly lines. And but you have to have all this information. So as I said, the company's then faced with making the decision, is the information they're going to get, the accuracy level, that level of information worth that amount of time? Is it going to be more accurate information than if they did just take the costs, all the related costs at the end of the day, and divide by the number of units? Because it is takes a lot of information. It is difficult and takes a lot of time to set up. They do have to get data from different sources. They can't all just get it from the ledger. They have to get it from like HR to get accumulate time. They have to get it from the accounts receivable invoices. They have to get time from records from like machine hours and things like that. So they're not going to just be able to sit down, pull up the GL and record some hours. So they have to evaluate, is the information we're going to get this way, is that going to be that much more accurate than if we did just standard costing? So if they only made red widgets and blue widgets, so red widgets went down the red assembly line and blue widgets went down the blue assembly line, and the only difference is they got painted different colors, would it be worth it to do the activity-based costing, breaking it down by activity? No, probably not, because unless painting them a different color required some different process, like they had to use a different base coat, I can't, just lost the word, but had to use a different base coat. Red took 3 layers of paint and blue only took 2 coats of paint. Unless there was something strange like that, there'd really be no reason to do activity-based costing if all you did was produce red widgets and blue widgets. Now, like I said, if you had a red widget, a blue widget, and then a blue widget with a tail, you'd have to decide what that process was to put the tail on. If it was just riveting a tail, it took 2 seconds of labor. Then evaluate how much labor difference between the two. If it was 15 seconds or whatever, then can you just take the additional cost somehow of materials and add it? There's different ways you could just do the cost of material difference, but leave labor the same, but not change the different method of costing by using activity-based costing. But activity-based costing is very useful if you have products and product lines that vary by the different types of activity involved. And one example is like healthcare. You have a nurse that's going to go treat a patient, and that patient just might have the flu. They need their temperature taken, need the doctor to write a prescription, and then they go on about their business. Then there's a patient that has a broken arm. The nurse has to take them down to x-ray, then bring them back. They have to help the doctor set the arm, put a cast on, that. So right there you have different activities involved. So you can have different methods, or that would be a good use of activity-based costing, because each type of care is going to have more than one or more methods of activity. Each type of care is going to have several activities involved, and so you couldn't just say every doctor's appointment is going to cost on average XYZ. Is going to on average cost $75, because this one might cost $44 and that one might cost $367 because of the time involved in the activities that were required. So does that all make sense?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Say, did I confuse you or? Okay, so I've kind of rambled on a little bit longer than I planned. You want me to walk through an exercise, put one together and just send it out? What do you want to do?
I think maybe putting one together to send out so there's different reference to look off of than just the examples in the book, because sometimes I feel like I get lost in those.
Okay. All right. Well, I will do that. I'll put one together and walk through it. Did you look at the one I put together? I think it was on Sunday, comparing the two methods of costing.
I don't think I saw that, sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right. All right. I was just going to see if it was helpful. Or so I'll put this together and then send it out and see if it's helpful.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. And just call me or email me if you ever have questions. And so that's what I'm here for.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good week.
You.
Okay. Bye-bye.